people have different perspectives and different opinions about everything.
Every little bit of change makes a huge, huge difference.
We're mostly all taught how to compete. We're not taught how to cooperate.
Yeah, if we can start by just going about your personal and your professional background and how you got into conflict resolution or conflict or peace building.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm Dr. Gigi Hamilton, and my personal background consists of me being originally from Ohio. I ended up leaving Ohio and joined the Army, and I was in the military as a mental health counselor. So I've been a counselor now for over 25 years doing psychotherapy. And upon doing that, I spent a lot of time working with couples, individuals, you name it. And then my passion was more towards leadership because I spent a lot of time working in the leadership arena. Eventually, I ended up getting my PhD in organizational leadership, and the area that I focus on the most is emotional intelligence. And ultimately, just having people learn how to understand what their emotions are so they can actually better communicate with one another. So I would say my passion in helping others really stemmed from me working both within the military and in my own group therapy practice, helping people figure out how to resolve conflict. A lot of times resolving conflict is not about the conflict itself, but really what each person is thinking about the other. And so sometimes I really like to help people understand what their core issues are and belief systems are so they can help change the narrative in the conversation.
Right. Oh, wow. I have spoken to a number of peace builders so far, and nobody who specializes in emotional intelligence, and that's I feel like that's the key to everything. Because
exactly.
Yeah, because awareness, self-awareness, awareness of others is all plays a huge role in how we interact. So I'm excited to learn more about this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I just think our culture, we're so reactive to begin with, right? We're high strung, we're overstressed, and our natural instinct is just to react on the spot. And emotional intelligence and teaching those skills help people slow it down a little bit so they can understand truly how they're feeling, what they need to say, and a better way to say it more often than not.
Right.
The peace building right there.
Wow. That's amazing. So as somebody who specializes in emotional intelligence, do you ever work with families, or are you mostly working with organizations and their
Well, I do
leadership?
both. Yeah, that's a great question. My primary focus has been for years couples. I'm an author as well, so I've written a book on how to survive your first year of marriage, right? So, which is really important. Yeah. So I do a lot of couples work. Within my group practice, I have people who do a lot of family therapy. They work with adolescents, children, and not my favorite population, but I do love the couples and individuals, because sometimes people need to come in and figure out how to have better communication with their bosses or their coworkers.
Mm-hmm. And so when you deal with couples, say you have a couple that is having fights over or arguing over the child's well-being or how to care for a child.
Yeah.
What's the one thing that you find is helpful when what one person is trying to say doesn't go through the other person, or just comes out and goes right through them? They're not really hearing it.
Right, they're right, because what will happen is they kind of draw the line in the sand, excuse me, and as they're drawing the line in the sand, they're kind of really steadfast on their point of view. So what I do in situations like that is help them back up a little bit and understand where their belief system is coming from, and actually giving them the opportunity of articulating what they believe. Because that's the piece that ultimately gets missed, right? They don't say, well, I grew up with my parents telling me to do my chores, right? And so if they don't say that, they just kind of say he needs to do his chores, right? And they don't really say where it's coming from. And sometimes you have to assess as couples, well, if that's the case, do we need to come up with a new rule for our marriage? And more
Right.
often than not, they don't do that, right? So
Right.
we help them do that in that peace building space.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really fascinating. You've spoken about how you have a firm, right? Like you
Yes,
work
I have
with.
a counseling and consulting firm. We've been operating for 13 years now, and I'm super
Oh,
excited
wow.
because, yeah, we do both, mental health counseling and psychotherapy, but we also do organizational development, program development, process improvement, and things like that.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And so
Yeah.
how did you go about establishing that?
Well, I did, when I got out of the military, I worked in agency mental health. And in those experiences, I was in leadership and I worked with as many populations as you can think of, like anything, everything. I've worked with the populations, and you kind of learn along the way what you like, which populations you really want to work with. But I always paid attention to how leaders function and operate and lead. And I ultimately knew that at some point I see the world in systems. And so for me, I always knew I wanted to have a company that could help have a greater impact on the world.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, to be honest with you, I tell you, when I started my company, I started it in name for a year, knowing I would do something with it, but I just let it sit there for a year before I really actually jumped out and did anything with it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Did you mention the name? I don't think I
Oh,
caught it.
I did not. No, it's Personal Enrichment Counseling and Consulting Services.
Oh, the name itself. Like,
You
you're
know,
gonna heal some wounds if you walk into
exactly
those
right.
doors.
Yeah, and it's funny because at the time when you were creating it, I follow all these how to start your business rules, right? There's a whole set of rules that you should follow. And one of the rules is, your company and your organization should say what you do. People should be able to know what you do by the name. But then you have companies like Uber, right? So
Right,
they've
right,
broken that mold. And yeah, so I have this long business name, but you're right. People do know what I do by my business name.
right,
Yeah.
right. I think it works both ways. It's just
Yeah.
a matter of how you market what you're
Right.
doing.
That's true.
Um, so you've mentioned that one of your approaches with couples is to get them to understand where their beliefs are coming from. What
Yes.
other strategies do you use when you are facing parties in conflict? What other strategies do you use to help them resolve?
Sure. Actually, that's pretty much consistent across the board because when you have companies or two individuals within a company that are in conflict, a lot of it is based on what they believe. Right. And so we have to really start from the beginning, like, how did this start? Let's get to the root cause of it. And now let's talk about what you both believe about the situation. And sometimes it's just miscommunication and they haven't even understood that they're not on the same page or they had different information. So when you start to break it down in those pretty minute details, then they can start to have conversation to get to a place of resolution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So again, communication is really important for,
Yes.
yeah. And what kind of challenges do you face in your job, in your as a company owner, but also as a consultant who helps people figure out how to move past their problems?
Sure. One of the biggest challenges that I'm facing right now is it's great for me to provide psychoeducational tools and training in this current space because of COVID. But the conflict resolution piece has been really difficult because you kind of need to be in the room with people. The
Right.
energy when you're there is just an entirely different dynamic. So you're kind of missing out on those things right now. I'm not comfortable with being in a lot of settings like that. So everything I'm doing right now is virtually. So that's one of the biggest challenges that I've had. But one of the growth opportunities that I've also had in this space is companies are struggling as well because of COVID, and we've been doing a lot more program development based on what their needs are. So we've been able to deliver that on a national platform because of COVID.
Oh, nice.
So it's
So
shifted.
it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, yeah.
But do you find that even though it's challenging to do these mediations or meetings
Mm.
virtually, do you find that you're still able to accomplish your goals with the
Yes.
companies?
Yes, absolutely. And I'll be honest, a lot of it really depends on how the two parties ended up coming to the table. You know, if they're willing participants in coming to the table, you find that they're more open to dive deeper and really understand what the issues are so they can get some resolution. But if it's mandated and they're not really wanting to be there, it's a little bit more difficult to get to a place of resolution.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine. And you have to spend time first not convincing, but trying to figure out why they're not interested in being there in the first place.
Exactly. So you have to peel back the layers of the onion for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's keeping you going with all the challenges that you have to face now, especially with COVID? What is the one thing that keeps you moving? You said your company is 13 years old. That's
Yeah.
a long time.
Yeah.
So-
Well, so when I was in the military, although I was they called it mental health specialist at the time. So I was a therapist in the military, but during my training, I had to be trained as an EMT, and I am not a fan of the medical field because I don't like blood, but, I had to be trained to be an EMT. And in the military, in order to graduate from that program, they put us through this process where we had to be in a war zone situation, and literally they taught us you had to jump out there and fix body after body, right? So I'm putting tourniquets on people, and we had bodies out there, actual people who were acting as the patients, and it they had eviscerated eyeballs, and it was all these things that I'm like, I'm so not medical, but let me fix this so I can graduate, right? But in that moment, I feel blessed. Let me just say that I've never had to have a experience like that, because I know that there are people who actually went through that training and they actually lived that life in real life. But the reason I bring that up is because all of these years that I've been out of the military, when COVID hit, I went back to that space, and I felt like, although I'm not fixing bodies physically, emotionally, I jumped back in that role to actually help people in that way.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah. So that's what's been keeping me going, because there's a lot of people who need some mending.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the difficulty in this work is that you don't necessarily always see the results of your work. Whereas if you are mending somebody who's physically hurt, if it's a wound, you'll put it back together and you can see what you did.
Right.
But it's just as important to mend emotional wounds. And I think, yeah, so that's a really great way to put it.
Yeah.
And what does your work with PPS entail? Do you have any projects, any current projects with PPS you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I'm working with one right now with Jeremy, and we're doing some education around conflict and just how to have crucial conversations. Sometimes you're in a situation as an employee, and maybe you have to have a crucial conversation with someone who's above your pay grade. How do you have that conversation without, being rude or disrespectful? And how do you have that conversation where you can actually get to a place where you can be heard and you can have the conversation to get some resolution and get change to happen?
Right.
Yeah, so that's one of the projects we're working on at this time, and it's pretty impactful.
Great. So
Yeah.
if you don't mind sharing, what's one thing that you tell people in this training to do if they're about to have that conversation with a superior and they need to be, cautious on how they approach the situation?
Sure. And a lot of it in what we do is how we package the introductory conversation, so really taking ownership of how you're feeling as an individual, and also stating what the need is, and also asking the person maybe how they can be of help if there's something they need, or if even I myself maybe misunderstood something. So it opens up the door for dialogue, so you can get to a place of seeing what their needs are, and maybe getting to a place where they can either make a change or hear you so that they can change.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. So the packaging matters.
Packaging is everything.
Yeah. I know a few people in my life going through not necessarily work related, just personal conflicts where, you know, the way they see it is no matter how they package it, the other person is offended, you
Yes.
know,
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, sometimes that happens, but I think putting some deeper thoughts into that beginning process helps a long way.
Yeah.
Um, wow, this has been fascinating. Let's talk about
Yeah.
something you would tell uh, new peace builders, people who are interested in doing this for a living or helping other people in their lives figure out how to reach the point of resolution for their problems. What advice would you share with them?
Well, going as a peace builder, when you know you're dealing with an issue where there's conflict there, right? I think the first thing that's going to be important for any new peace builder going in is assessing trust levels amongst the parties. Because if you don't know where their trust levels are, it doesn't matter what you say, it doesn't matter what belief systems are. If the person has trust issues, then it's going to be really difficult to even get to a place where they can hear each other because they're going to be really guarded and you're going to be working against the grain. So understanding that you have to have that conversation before you even get into the areas of conflict.
Right.
Yeah.
And if the trust has been lost, how
Mm-hmm.
do you approach that?
Then we may have to spend some time trying to rebuild that before
Okay.
we can get into resolving some conflict.
Right.
Yeah.
But that does involve having both parties take some actions, right?
And being willing, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's severed and there's no going back. And then we really have to figure out how do we even begin to mend this? And sometimes those things happen over time. Trust isn't rebuilt in 3 or 4 sessions.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Um,
Mhm.
I'm going right to your website when we're done, so I can see what else I can pick up from there because
Well, please do. Yeah, I'd love that.
I can tell you're really good at what you do. So
Oh,
um,
thank you. Mhm.
yeah.
You
I
know what? And I love what I do. So that's the important piece. I'm really passionate about it. I feel like it's a gift that I've been given. And so my goal is to help people really understand who they are on a deeper level. And sometimes it's difficult to do that on your own.
right.
Get
Right.
there. Yeah.
Well, what did you write your dissertation on? And this is not one of the questions. I'm just
Oh
curious.
no, it's women in banking and their ability to use emotional intelligence as a to help them be effective leaders.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we're the third, sometimes the fourth, depending on it switches back and forth between Charlotte and San Francisco being the largest banking industry. And
Mm,
so I felt like you couldn't live in this city and not address, you know, one of the top industries that is here in our city. So I dealt with women in banking as it relates to their leadership traits and how they use emotional intelligence to be effective.
wow. I didn't know about that about Charlotte.
Hmm.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really glad you took the time to speak with me today. And if
Yeah.
there is anything else you'd like to add, please do so because I can already see the piece is gonna be interesting.
Oh,
Um,
good. Yeah.
yeah, but if
Well,
there is anything you want to add,
Well, I'll tell you one thing that I like about Pollack Peace Building is that I think Jeremy has a gift in choosing people to be on his team, and I'm just really impressed with the talent that he has there. You know, it's just really dynamic, and I consider myself, when you think of leadership, you know, there's different types of leaders. There's laissez-faire leaders, and they're kind of laid back and hands off, and now you do whatever you want to do until you get in trouble, right? So
right?
then you also have these transactional leaders that Yeah, you do this for me, I might give you a raise. If you do it bad, you're gonna get written up, right? So you don't want to be that type of leader either. I personally consider myself a transformational leader in that, my goal is to work my people that I work with out of a job, where I want them to grow to the point that they're doing something bigger and better in their next phase. And you do that by assessing their strengths, understanding who they are, knowing how to capitalize on what they bring to the table. And I say that because I think Jeremy does a really good job at that as well. He's, to me, really talented in that. Like, I'm impressed at the pool of people that he has brought together, and it's something very special. I've not seen it before to this extent, but I'm really blown away with it. And I'm glad to be a part of the team as a result of that.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
I was telling my husband the other day how inspirational the way he runs his company is, and it's just, I mean, you can tell he really cares about his team, but he's focused on the mission as well. So it's been really great to see, because like you, I haven't seen that much out there with this style. So I agree, and I'm glad to be a part of it too, even in my short time so far.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, it's good for us to be working together. I love it, right?
Yeah, I'm really glad I got a chance to meet you. I look forward to learning more from you.
Awesome. Well, good. I look forward to it. And just let me know if you ever have any questions.
I will. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Well, you take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.